Welcome, everyone, to Talking Textiles. I'm Mark Tyrell, a member of ATA's Canada Division. The goal of this podcast is to get to know the wide variety of positions and markets that make the advanced textiles world turn. We'll be talking to professionals in different roles throughout this series to help inspire the next generation of textiles professionals and anyone interested in learning about others' journey in the world of textiles. ATA offers advanced textiles content throughout the year, including the upcoming Advanced Textiles Expo taking place September 24th to 26th in Anaheim, California. Please visit textiles.org/events to learn more. On today's episode, part one of the artificial intelligence topic, we are speaking with Adam Penner, owner of AP Consulting and Technical Services, where they focus on transforming your digital fabrication and blending your craftsmanship with modern manufacturing, ensuring efficiency and profitability. And now, let's talk textiles. Hi, I'm Mark Tyrell, and today our guest is Adam Penner of AP Consulting and Technical Services. Adam is an authorized Rhino trainer, CNC technician, and a consultant working to help businesses automate and transform their processes. Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So I know that the topic today really that we want to cover is artificial intelligence and maybe how it can impact our industry. But I know everybody, listen to the podcast, and I know for myself, one of my favorite things is really to kind of hear everybody's origin stories. There's always interesting routes for people to come to this industry, and especially, given your approach to the industry and what you're bringing to the industry, I think people would love to hear your background story and how you got to this point.
Absolutely. I moved out to Colorado after high school to attend university. I went to the Colorado School of Mines, where I got a bachelor's degree in engineering physics. Bit of a science background there. When I graduated, I ended up working at Paul's Custom Canvas here in Denver, working under Mike Charpentier. So he was able to teach me the trade. They were doing everything digitally. So I got into the CAD side of things, working in servicing the cutting table on the CNC side, and really kind of found that passion for automating and the kind of semi-custom manufacturing industry. From there, I went to work at a company called SDS Automation, where I was traveling around the country servicing and installing automation equipment. So I would fly in somewhere, I would set it up, train everybody how to use it, and then if something broke in the future, I would end up going back there to fix it. So that was really where I kind of discovered a passion for training people and working with different companies. And through that, I got this really unique perspective on a bunch of different industries. I've been in over 100 different facilities over the last 4 years. So I've seen how people do things a bunch of different ways. I've seen what works, what doesn't work, what I like, what I don't like. Now that I've started AP Consulting 2 years ago, I'm really able to help kind of share that experience and help small businesses grow and succeed using automation and technology.
It's super interesting. So with SDS Automation, you weren't limited to this industry. It wasn't textile specific. It was across all industries and anywhere they needed automated equipment and CNC cutting stuff.
Correct. So we specialized in actually sheet metal bending equipment. So we did some really specialized equipment for mostly the signage industry and then also the die cutting industry. So cutting corrugated fiberboard, that kind of thing, paper products. Actually, our machines had about a 50% market share. So any cardboard box that you touch, there was 50% chance that one of our machines touched that somewhere along the line.
Okay, so like the cutting and the folding and all those things?
Exactly, yeah. So I was in plants that were doing cutting, folding, gluing, and then also in the signage industry, which was probably most similar to the textiles or the industrial textiles, I should say, where it's a lot of smaller businesses doing kind of semi-custom projects.
Cool. So I got to ask though, you started out with a degree that was related to mining and a physics degree. So how did you end up out of school working for a custom canvas company?
It was a job that I got. It was a great job for a really good company. I really wanted to stay in Denver out here. I absolutely love it. So here I am 10 years later, still out here. This is my home.
Nice. And along the way, you kind of discovered a bit of a passion for the textile industry or at least kind of kept it in your roots.
Yeah, always kept working least kind of part-time on the side for freelancing for different textiles clients throughout my whole time at SDS. I really enjoy the industry. I enjoy the people in it, and I really enjoy working with small businesses. And there aren't too many industries left that have small businesses like this left that are using technology this way and still growing effectively and really kind of fighting for bringing small businesses back a little bit.
Right. Oh, well, we certainly appreciate that. Those of us running small businesses, we can use all the help we can get, and I can definitely speak from the perspective of a small business that when I took over, and we're probably not, as far as our industry is concerned, we might even be at the bottom of the medium sized businesses. But it was crazy to me because I actually came from a background in electronic components, just as a distributor, so I don't really have a very technical background. I was more on the business side of it, but just to see just how far we were lagging behind. Like, I came to a family business, but man, it just felt like we were doing things like the same way since the 70s or 80s, and so little automation, and even our accounting system, we were using it as a glorified calculator. It was ridiculous how manual things were. So it's great to kind of help move things forward, and I know that we've got a ton more to do in that respect. So it's very interesting to me to talk to somebody like yourself who is at the other end of the curve, as far as I'm concerned, in regards to our industry, and really trying to help bring tools that are at the forefront of industry and maybe at the forefront of technology and applying them to an industry that is, just trying to come along and maybe at the other end of the curve. And to your point, I guess there's so much to do here and so much low hanging fruit and places to implement this technology that it must be kind of interesting there, and must be tough to even decide, what places need it most, and how to get the most bang for the buck for some of this technology. You've got a technological background, but a lot of it is in working with machinery and CNC machines and folding and more physical manipulation. How did you get involved with AI, and how have you been using it, and how have you been helping clients use it?
So I kind of stumbled upon it last year. I was hanging out with some friends, and one of them mentioned, "Hey, have you tried this Chat GPT thing? It does all this crazy stuff." And the next day, I Googled it and started playing around with it. And I went, "Whoa, this can actually save me time and effort right now." Um, this can help me write code. It can help improve my emails. It can help improve my writing. It can give me ideas and generate content for the things that I'm not necessarily the best at. Like you said, I have a pretty good mechanical and engineering background. I can code pretty well. I'm really good with my hands working with equipment and troubleshooting and fixing things, right? I'm not a great writer. I like to think that I can be if I spend enough time on it and edit things a million times, but I'm not. It's something I kind of dread is, I have to write up this report or write a long email explaining something. So now I looked at that and I go, wow, I have this tool that can now save me huge amounts of time doing the stuff that I'm not good at. This is awesome.
So effectively, you used it to kind of fill in the gaps, right? Like, so you can kind of focus on the things that you are good at and where you're likely ahead of the curve. And if it can kind of help with those areas, do you want to spend your time improving your weaknesses, or do you really want to focus on your strengths? And I think the prevailing mentality and philosophy is you got to go with your strengths. Like, you're going to make so much more progress that way. And if you can find ways to kind of fill in the gap, it's one thing if you're in a company or a big organization where you can have people do that. It's another thing when you're in a smaller organization, and that's way too costly a solution, right? So bringing in a technology like this can be super helpful. So you mentioned for writing, and I get that part. I've toyed around with it in that sense, and it's great for kind of filling in content. And as somebody who fancies themselves a pretty decent writer, and I definitely pay attention to it when people are writing, and I'm a bit of a stickler for anything going out of our company, making sure that it makes sense. I'm curious to know, for somebody that's from a technical background, and you said you're a pretty good coder, but you found that AI was helpful with coding.
Yeah, so I've been able to use it a lot to really supplement what I'm doing. So if there's something that's repetitive, or if I already have a template of sorts, I can give that into the AI, tell it to make certain changes, and have it output something that's either correct or 95% of the way there, and then I can just make those final tweaks. So in that sense, it's not completely replacing me, but it's just supplementing my skills and getting through a lot of the more kind of tedious parts of it, or the sort of things where you might have to change something in multiple places or go through all that. It can go through those things really quickly and efficiently and get you to the other side. Still struggles with some of the logic stuff, especially when you're dealing with something very, very specific. Like in my case, I'm doing a lot of things with Rhino 3D, the CAD software. It doesn't have kind of that background. It obviously doesn't know how to make an awning or a boat cover, right?
Right.
It has a general idea, but obviously the specifics aren't there yet. Will they be there in the future? Probably, but right now it's not quite there yet. So I'm able to use it to supplement what I'm doing, and really just kind of build on that. And then also there's some knowledge of just other general things, right? It's pulling from these vast libraries across various industries, right? I think that I have a unique perspective because I've been fairly deep into three different unique industries. Well, ChatGPT is looking at the whole economy, right? It's, maybe there's something that it saw that a banker's doing that, oh, I can just copy and paste that into my code, that sort of thing. It's processed more information than any human could in their lifetime. So being able to lean on that and utilize it is a really valuable tool.
So you kind of put in like the bigger pieces and the things where it takes like decision making and creativity, and it kind of does the grunt work for you in terms of like filling in the simpler parts of the coding and the repetitive aspects of it. Is that about accurate?
Yeah, that's where it's at right now. In 5 to 10 years, I suspect that answer will have changed pretty drastically. But at the moment, yeah, that's how I'm utilizing it.
For myself, with a pretty basic understanding of AI and how it works, my understanding is it's gathering information at a way quicker pace and having access to whatever's out there in the public domain, and just bringing it in according to, I guess, keywords and algorithms depending on what we ask for, right? And it's just kind of pulling together the collective knowledge on a topic. Is that accurate?
Yeah, this might be a good segue to take a step back and just look at what AI is in general and what that word means, because I think we've started using it pretty much everywhere right now. And it's an interesting term with a pretty long history going all the way back to the 50s and 60s. So you might hear AI for artificial intelligence. There's also machine learning, all a very similar set of basically algorithms that we've developed over the decades. And with computer processing getting so much more powerful now, I looked it up just before the podcast. The iPhone 14 is 10 million times more powerful than the IBM 7090 that took up a whole room in the 1960s. So you have 10 million times more computing power in your pocket for under $1,000 than this room-sized computer did 50 years ago.
Which was the computers NASA was using to send astronauts into space, I think, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that took a whole team of people to run, and you fed it punch cards and had vacuum tubes and all sorts of crazy stuff. And it was the cutting edge that got us to the moon.
That's wild. It's funny. When I was working in electronics, I had a similar thing in a presentation that I did where we had, one of those singing birthday cards. And, we'd open it up and it started wherever, and it would be like there was actually more computing capacity in that singing birthday card than there was in those supercomputers that, at the time they were trying to put a man on the moon.
Yeah, it's an incredible, when you start looking at these orders of magnitude, it's a really incredible, the pace of technology in the last 100 years has grown so much faster than probably any time in human history. It's pretty remarkable to think about it at that level and just how crazily fast everything is growing.
So as I had understood it, it was it's gathering that information, but we also hear that it's learning and that it kind of improves and it gathers more as it goes. And now I don't know if that's based on the algorithms that are fed into it. So it's kind of taught to go and learn and teach itself. Do you have any insight on that, like in terms of how that's done or how experiences you've had with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So A very simple example of AI that was really successful commercially was the US Postal Service started, they're actually kind of pioneers on this. They contracted University of Buffalo to write this algorithm for them, and it was for handwriting recognition. So what they did was they wrote a computer program that would look at a bunch of different examples. So tens or hundreds of thousands of examples of a handwritten A, all differently, and then build its own patterns to recognize an A. So you could show it an A that it's never seen before, and it can identify that. Fast forward a few years, and rather than just feeding it handwriting, we fed it the internet. So it's learned and trained on the internet. It's looking at Wikipedia. It's looking at all of these resources that we've compiled on the internet and using those to feed back essentially text to us now, or some cases images, whatever that might be. And through that process and through its complexity, what we're seeing is they're called emergent behaviors. So it's doing things that it was never specifically taught to do. So just like you train a dog and you'd coax it to do certain behaviors by giving it an extra reward for certain things, we can do the same thing with these AI algorithms and essentially kind of coach them so that they give us better responses to what we want. An example that I heard the other day is through Tesla's self-driving cars. What they're doing is they're gathering all this data of human drivers and then essentially replicating that. Well, U-turns are something that it taught itself. They never had to coax it or try to get it to do U-turns. That was just a fully emergent behavior that the self-driving algorithm just picked up on its own and started doing. Just one day they looked at all the data and they went, wow, it's starting to do U-turns. We never taught it to do that. We never authorized that. We never coaxed it to do U-turns. It just started doing U-turns.
And the idea was that it picked it up from human behavior, like it was observing people making U-turns and said, "Yeah, I can do that."
Yeah. Or if it just, said, oh, like this path is really efficient, let's do it. And then it did it once and went, oh, that was actually a really efficient path. And it strengthened those, that part of the algorithm to say, hey, this is an option all on its own, and started doing U-turns.
Wow, that's got to have pretty interesting ramifications when they think about, like that level of learning.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of these behaviors and things that start to come out of these, especially when they're more complicated. We have this text feedback and it's giving these really human-like answers. We do start to use words like behaviors and thoughts or ideas, that kind of thing, for how to describe what it's doing and what's coming back to us.
And in your experience, and I picked this up from an article that you were a part of and commented on the ATA Fabrics review, there was certain tasks that you had tried to accomplish or give into AI program and didn't get very good results. And a short time later, went and tried the same thing and got much better results. And have you found that to be pretty consistent?
Yeah. And I think part of that is both the products that are out there improving and then also myself improving as giving prompts and everything. I
Right.
remember when I first started at Paul's Custom Canvas, my boss asked me, how I learned to do something. And I said, well, I Googled it. So I thought you had a degree in physics. Well, I said, well, I kind of really just got my degree in Googling. And I didn't realize quite at the time. I thought it was just a joke and thought it was funny. But it was a little bit more pointed than that, right? Because Googling is a skill, believe it or not, right?
Right.
People are really good at finding information online after a quick search. Other people aren't. Uh, so that's a skill, is entering in the correct query terms and figuring out, where it's going to go, skipping those first two links that are ads, whatever it might be. And I think it's the same thing on these products like ChatGPT or Copilot. There is definitely a skill to using them. I've definitely gotten better at using it, what it's going to do, giving prompts that are going to get me what I want out of it. And I think also at the same time, those products are improving as well.
Yeah, and I'd have to say, I feel like that is something that is a bit of a generational difference. I think you're quite a few years younger than I am, and I've noticed it with different people within my family, my entourage, or people that are around me. And don't get me wrong, it's not strictly that way. I mean, I've got a friend who's nearly a decade older than me that's really good at this stuff, and you know what I mean, and uses Chat GPT. He's actually in human resources and now in doing other stuff, and he creates content all the time, whether it be job descriptions or information questions, coming up with questions for interviews and that, and uses it regularly. But when you speak to that ability to search or to get the most out of whether it be the internet in general through search engines and chat gpt, there's that level, you know, when you've kind of grown up with this stuff and you've looked at it, whatever, it's so intuitive, right? Or it's more intuitive for that, for people that have kind of grown up and learned with this stuff all the way along. And to your point of, you know, you got a degree in googling, right? That it got to the point, you know, when I was coming up in school, there was so much more memorization and, you know, and trying to keep those facts and get them wherever. And I think we've realized there's not really much point to that. It's all at your fingertips. You just got to know how to use the tools.
And that's something I'm really big on is, I see as the world gets more and more specialized, trying to memorize and learn every single thing is less and less practical in a lot of ways. Yes, there's a huge value to memorizing things. It kills me that they don't still make kids memorize, your 10 by 10 multiplication table. I
Right.
want to know what 8 times 7 is off the top of my head. I don't want to have to think about it every single time, that kind of thing. But then there is also this whole other side to it, like you're saying, of trying, if I can access 10 times the information, it just takes me a second to do it versus memorizing it. What's more valuable, what's gonna be better for your business and what that means moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that generationally we've kind of got to get behind and got to make an effort, you know, what regardless of how easy it is, because it's really not that difficult to learn it, right? And to get to it. And have you found that there's really an appetite for this stuff and going forward, or is it tougher to kind of bring people along to it and, you know, adopting technology on every level?
I think, a lot of it is a little industry specific. You definitely see different industries at different kind of points in technology. But I think the biggest thing is once you can show people, once you've used it for the first time, whether that's getting a piece of automation equipment, you go to a trade show and you actually see it run and you go, wow, this thing's going to save me a huge amount of time. I don't care that it's 50, 100, $200,000, like it's worth it. I've seen it. Or just using it for that first time. So for example, one of my clients, they were doing a bunch of SOPs for their shop. So they wanted, each department to have standardize everything, take pictures of what's good, what isn't, and how to do every single process. So they had all their kind of department managers write up their different processes and just give bullet points as to what they all do. Well, it all fell on one guy up in the office to then take all those bullet points and turn them into nicely written, formatted, coherent documents that you could read and go, oh, this is how, I could read this, walk out into the shop, and I could do this clumsily, but I could figure it out. Well, it was taking him forever, and I walked into his office, and he was completely frustrated and going bananas. So I said, dude, just plug it into ChatGPT or Copilot. Just throw the bullet points in there, tell it to make you an SOP, and just see what comes out. And he's going, well, it doesn't know my business. It doesn't know this. I go, dude, just try it. Just try it once. Humor me. Of course, his frustration grows a little bit because now he's going to get sidetracked or something. Well, he does it once and it spits out a perfect SOP for him. And he looks at me and goes, what? What the hell? How didn't I know this existed? I go, dude, I've been telling you about this for weeks. You just had to try it. You just had to find something that worked, right? So then the next day I go in, he goes, yeah, I had 3 days blocked out to do all this. I didn't that afternoon. It took me 2 hours. I just plugged everything in, did my little edits where it got things wrong or it was a little off on the specific process. You reformatted it a little bit and they're done. Awesome. Perfect. So I think really just trying it and seeing it with your own eyes is the biggest thing to convince people.
Right. Sounds like you had an instant convert right there.
I did, yes.
One of the things I did to kind of prepare for this is I was like, yeah, and I'm not going to take credit for this one. My fiance said to me as I'm jumping, you know, getting ready for the podcast, she's like, wouldn't it be funny if you just like asked Chat GPT to give you like a bunch of questions for your podcast for on AI sort of thing. So I've got this list that I pulled out, and at first it was going to be massive, and it was on AI, and then I asked it about, you know, AI, in the industrial textiles industry. And the first question that came up with was, what are the current challenges faced by the industrial textiles industry, and how can AI help address them?
What a great question, Mark. One of the biggest things that I see is staffing and hiring people, retaining people, and training people. And I think that could be a task that AI can definitely help out with, right? Whether it's from generating a job post, building out whatever the job responsibilities are, writing training documents so that somebody can come in and learn the job quicker. You don't have to spend too much time training them, all the way up and even helping with HR kind of thing, whether it's like writing somebody up or writing a document, writing a contract, all that kind of stuff. So that's a big challenge that I see people having, and something that can definitely be assisted using just even the free tools that are out there.
Right. Not to mention your example earlier, where somebody saves 2.5 days on a task that they had blocked up all that time. So if we are short, and I think staffing is a big challenge, and the challenges that you're speaking of, those come once you're able to find the people. And I think the first challenge is just that difficulty in finding people, where there's not a lot of people readily trained for this industry. So for sure, to your point, training is an important challenge within our industry, because you're often getting people that are green, and then there's also, can you attract people to the industry, because it's not something that people kind of grow up thinking about. And I'd imagine it was the same for you. You came from a different background, but then maybe there was something that was available, and you had the added motivation to stay where you were, so ended up in the industry. And to be fair, I think that's how so many people end up in this industry. We kind of fall into it. We realize it's a lot of fun, there's a lot of potential there's a lot of creativity, but it's not the easiest thing necessarily to grab it, because it's not a traditional career path that people have or look at.
Absolutely. And I think that's something where, I mean, even something as simple as if you wanted to say, hey, Chat GPT, give me an outline plan for how to do outreach and training, right? Give me apprenticeship model for my business, or, give me ideas for outreach to a community college to do an apprenticeship deal or something. I guarantee it would give you a great 2-page outline on how to do that, what the steps to take are, and where to get started, versus just kind of having that idea floating around in the back of your head. Are you letting it run your business for you? No, but you're using it to supplement your ideas, give you that jumping off point, and just help organize things to get some of those bigger things, right? Like, something even as broad as just outreach, industry outreach to bring new people in, you can have it help you out with.
Right. Interesting. You mentioned it's not going to run your business for you. And I would imagine there's people maybe asking this question. Do you think there's any risk that we're going to get intellectually lazy, or mentally lazy, and not really kind of put the thought into it? Because I mean, you mentioned it's scouring the internet. Wikipedia is out there among those things, and a lot of that knowledge, a lot of that stuff hasn't really been vetted, right? Like, and there's a lot of things out there that are not, there may be a good idea, it might be very close to accurate, but maybe not accurate at all. And I don't know how good AI is at figuring out the difference, and knowing what's, I guess, discerning between what is vetted and what isn't, or I don't know if it looks for consistencies or not. Do you see that as an issue of kind of people accepting something as, that's fine, that's great, and God forbid it should be engineering numbers or something, and something collapses because they didn't do their due diligence?
Yeah, I think that's a massive issue that we're going to have to tackle as a society, whether anything as big as problems with misinformation and disinformation out there online, to I'm dealing with it more on a smaller scale, right? Like, if you, so say you're a business and you're hiring somebody, you get a cover letter, and it's not written by them, right? They're telling you all these things, and you go, well, it's obvious that you didn't write this, that kind of thing. You get an email from somebody, and you go, he didn't write that. You just stuck that in the Chat GPT, and you didn't even read it because it doesn't apply to me, kind of thing.
Right.
I think and my solution to it is really just taking ownership, right? Even if I copy and paste something out of Chat GPT and put it wherever that might be, email, document, report, whatever. I'm taking ownership for that, right? Those are my words. And if there's something wrong in there, that's on me. So I'm reading every single thing that comes out of it. I'm editing it. I'm taking ownership for that. So I think to your point, there is a huge kind of intellectual liability there as to if you're just blindly trusting this stuff and copying and pasting it in, you may as well go swing a hammer with a blindfold on and try and build a house, right? It's not, it's a tool that we can use to supplement our own intelligence and intellect and abilities. It's not a replacement for us. That's how I view it.
And to be fair, I guess the danger has always existed to some degree, and hopefully it's not on too grave of a level, or people are definitely doing their due diligence where it's necessary. Because as you were saying, you receive a document and it doesn't really apply to you, and you can tell that somebody was kind of lazy about it. And to be fair, I've seen that with documents coming from everything from consultants to lawyers, where you can tell, like, yeah, you just put some names in here and substituted different names for the contract, and you're like, some of this applies, some of this doesn't. Or in places where you can see, you're like, yeah, well, you missed this one, like, because that's not my company, or that's not, and you kind of see that laziness. So I guess it's always been there. People will take shortcuts where they can, and in a lot of cases it makes sense to do so. But I guess the difference here is that was maybe people regurgitating or recycling their own work. It's a little bit different when you're kind of pulling it from the internet and from the, what I mean, and just trying to kind of gather it from different information.
I think it would be interesting to see where certain areas go backwards, like a handwritten letter. I think that something like that is going to be much more valuable going forward, right? Because that thank you email, who cares? You can make that
Right.
seconds, right? If you actually sit down and write a handwritten letter, that means something to people, right? That human interaction, that time you're taking, that sort of thing. So I think there are certain areas where with this new technology, we might actually backtrack in a way.
Right, right, and or at least we'll see a greater value in some of those older practices because everything else is just so prevalent.
Right.
That's a great point. So on the flip side of it, everything out being out in the public domain, like I'm wondering, as people put documents out there, whether it be marketing material, pictures, and whatnot, and a lot of the stuff generated by AI, is there any issue with intellectual property or copyrights, copyright infringement, information that's out there, or is it only taking from the public domain so it automatically alleviates that concern?
No, I think that's a great question, and that's probably over my head as far as my knowledge of it in the legal system. But yeah, I definitely do some research before necessarily commercializing anything that comes out of these algorithms and checking what it is and whether it's even copyrightable, what you're getting out, what their terms of service are. Definitely an area to be aware of.
Fair enough. Yeah, and you're right. It's probably a topic that's a little ambitious for our podcast today. As a final question, you work with different customers, and you've given an example of where putting SOPs together, was made a lot quicker by whether it was, I think you said Chat GPT, or what was the other
They used Microsoft Copilot for that one because they had an
Microsoft Copilot. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so I mean, honestly, this is opening me up to different, like, and I guess Chat GPT is getting all the press, but there's a lot of different ones out there. And I know in the article in ATA there was mention of quite a few different vehicles that can be used. My question being, have you seen examples where AI was useful in actually transforming processes with any of your customers in terms of helping their whether their manufacturing process, logistics within their shops or within their manufacturing facilities?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two sides to that question. These machine learning algorithms are out there and they have been for a long time. Your cell phone wouldn't work without them. FedEx, UPS, whatever, US Postal Service, just to read handwriting. That they are integrated within our society pretty thoroughly at this point. So I think they already are, even if in ways that you're not necessarily seeing on the front end. This new wave of kind of the chat GPT generative AI type things are really kind of getting the press. I'm really mostly seeing these new ones, the chat GPTs, Copilots, Google Bard, or whatever its new name is now, really more on the administrative side of things right now, helping out with the more white collar stuff. I think that will probably change in the future. I was listening to an interview with Sam Altman the other day. He's the founder of OpenAI. They made ChatGPT,
Mhm.
and he started his career in robotics and then switched over to the software AI side. And what he was saying is, it's actually, believe it or not, we think of robotics and replacing all this blue collar work, but what we're seeing now is it's replacing all this white collar work instead.
Right.
And the human body is actually something that's a much, pretty difficult to actually replicate in a lot of aspects. So maybe the AI is going to help us out with that in the future. But for right now, yeah, so I'm mostly seeing it more on the admin white collar side of businesses more than on the shop floor at the moment for
Right.
these new generative programs and stuff.
Right. Yeah, and I think I actually listened to a podcast with that same individual when I remember he kind of hearing that, and and that kind of surprised him and took him back. That wasn't where he felt it was going, and it actually went in the other direction, and it was more on the software side, I guess, even if we're looking at ourselves. Adam, listen, I'd like to thank you for being on the podcast today. I think we've probably, I don't even know if we could say we've scratched the surface on this one, but I would imagine this is maybe the beginning in a whole series of podcasts to discuss this stuff. I mean, obviously, automation is very important to our industry, like it is to pretty much every industry out there. But it seems to be evolving so quickly that I can imagine the conversation around it is gonna evolve just as quickly and gonna change, and the topics are just gonna be flowing like a fire hose. It's not exactly a trickle at this point. I think it's just changing so fast.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm pretty bullish on this stuff. The way I am trying to look at it is, I can't see the future. If it was 1900 and somebody showed you a car and you went, oh, I don't, how's this going to help my bakery? Right. Well,
Right.
you can't run a bakery without cars now. The same thing, whatever, 30 years ago, if somebody described the internet to you, you go, oh, this isn't going to help my whatever coffee shop. And you couldn't run your coffee shop now without the internet kind of thing. So I think for the people who think that this doesn't apply to them or they aren't quite sure how to use it yet, I just encourage everybody to try it, explore it, learn about it, read articles, and just stay on top of it, because if this does end up being a car or internet or whatever else moment in the economy, in the country, in the world, then you're going to want to be savvy on these things as moving forward so that you can use them and integrate them into your business.
Couldn't said it better. And that's actually, I think, great advice to conclude the podcast today. Once again, Adam, thanks very much for being on the podcast. And for anybody looking to get more advice or more help on this, Adam's company is AP Consulting. And so he helps companies automate their processes and really helping bring technology to different companies out there that can use it in terms of helping with efficiencies and filling in some of the gaps where they need help.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of ATA Talking Textiles. ATA is a not-for-profit association representing the international specialty fabrics marketplace. Learn more about the events, workshops, and webinars ATA hosts throughout the year at textiles.org/events.